On BBC One Scotland, the BBC News at 1 with Ben Brown, and Reporting Scotland with Graham Stewart.
Today at 1, a surprise visit to Britain by Ukraine's President Zelensky. He's been meeting the Prime Minister at Chequers, with the UK promising a new package of air defence missiles and attack drones.
Of course, we concentrate on military support, and thank you very much for this package that you prepared. Great, huge, really what can save the lives for our people. Thank you so much.
Well, Mr. Zelensky said he wants more fighter jets to control the skies over Ukraine, but Downing Street has repeated it has no plans to send them. Also this lunchtime. A-level and GCSE exams are getting fully underway for many pupils. In England, the exam regulator says grades will still take account of the COVID pandemic. Too close to call in Turkey's crucial presidential election. It looks like there'll have to be a runoff in 2 weeks' time. Concerns that people are being wrongly diagnosed with ADHD after online assessments by private clinics.
So this is the final roundtable.
And treachery rewarded. BAFTA glory for the hit reality show The Traitors and its host Claudia Winkleman.
On Reporting Scotland at 1:30, the First Minister says the economy here needs migration and criticises the Home Secretary. And the couple driven from their home after being wrongly targeted by so-called paedophile hunters.
Good afternoon. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is here in the UK for a surprise meeting with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. It follows his visits to Paris, Berlin and Rome, where Mr. Zelensky has been trying to secure more military support for his country ahead of its long-awaited spring counter-offensive against Russian forces. Well, Downing Street announced today the UK will send Ukraine hundreds of air defence missiles and attack drones. Russia says it takes an extremely negative view of that new British military support. Here's our diplomatic correspondent, Caroline Hawley. Well, in a moment we'll talk more about this to Hugo Bachega, our correspondent in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv. But first, let's go to our political correspondent, David Wallace-Lockhart, who's at Westminster for us. David, we saw warm hugs, handshakes, smiles at Chequers, but also a promise of more British military hardware for Ukraine. Hugo, thank you. Hugo Bachega there in Kyiv, and thanks to David Wallace-Lockhart at Westminster. Exams are getting fully underway for most pupils in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. England's exam regulator, Ofqual, says the disruption caused by COVID will be taken into account in the GCSE and A-level grades that are awarded. The regulator says COVID cast a long shadow and that students should be able to get the same grades they would have done if the pandemic had never happened. Here's our education editor, Branwood Jeffries. The battle to be the next president of Turkey looks set to go to a runoff election in 2 weeks' time. Voters went to the polls yesterday with a choice between the current leader, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's been in power for some 2 decades, and his secular challenger, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who's promising to restore full democracy to Turkey and to improve relations with NATO allies. So far, neither man seems to have got the 50% of the vote they need to avoid a runoff. Anna Foster reports from Turkey. Here, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, will make a speech this afternoon saying the government must remember its election promises and get down overall immigration numbers. Net migration figures, due to be published next week, are expected to show they've hit a record high. Let's get more on this from our chief political correspondent, Nick Eardley, who joins me. Nick, what is the significance, do you think, of these remarks this afternoon from the Home Secretary? Nick, thank you very much. Nick Eardley. Junior doctors in England have already been on strike for more pay, and now senior doctors or consultants are also voting on whether they should take industrial action as well. Their union, the British Medical Association, says the government's latest pay offer is unacceptable. Well, consultants' salaries start below £90,000 but can rise to nearer £120,000 depending on the extent of their experience. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym. And the time is just 18 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky makes a surprise visit to the Prime Minister at Chequers, with the UK promising a new package of air defence missiles and attack drones. And coming up, calls for VAT on sunscreen to be scrapped to make it more affordable.
On Reporting Scotland, in around 15 minutes, the First Minister says the economy here needs migration and criticises the Home Secretary. And 90 years of saving lives, the air ambulance service supporting our remote and island communities.
A BBC investigation has discovered that patients are being diagnosed with ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, after online assessments that are unreliable. An undercover Panorama reporter was seen by 3 private clinics which all diagnosed him with ADHD and offered him powerful drugs. But a comprehensive in-person assessment by the NHS showed that actually he didn't have the condition. Well, the clinics insist they do conduct thorough assessments and do follow national guidelines. Here's Rory Carson. And you can see more on that story on Panorama, private ADHD clinics exposed. That's on iPlayer now or on BBC One at 8 o'clock tonight. There are concerns that a landmark victims bill, which is about to be debated in Parliament, does not go far enough to protect survivors of abuse. Broadcaster Charlie Webster, who was abused by her running coach along with her best friend Katie, has raised concerns in an open letter to the Justice Secretary. Katie took her own life in January. Here's Jane McCubbin. Several UK cancer charities are calling for VAT on sunscreen to be scrapped to make it more affordable. Sunscreen is classed as a cosmetic product, and so it carries a 20% tax, as Graham Satchell now reports. Now, the reality TV show The Traitors and its host Claudia Winkleman were among the big winners at the BAFTA Awards last night. The late Queen's tea with Paddington Bear during the Platinum Jubilee celebrations won the award for the most memorable television moment. Kate Winslet and Ben Whishaw were among the main acting awards. Our entertainment correspondent Lisa Mazimba has this report. And my award for best weather forecaster is Darren Bett, who's with us here.
If I'd known I'd have worn a tuxedo, Ben, but I'm not sure that's fitting for the weather. The weather is looking very quiet this week in contrast to what we had last week. We're starting on a chilly note, but it will gradually get just a little bit warmer day on day. Not a great deal of rain in the forecast. We had that cloud sweep down towards the southeast overnight. Again, didn't bring much rain. Got a few showers then following on behind that. But we've also got the winds more from the north or northwest, and that's brought in this cooler air and this chilly start to the new week. Ben.
Sounds good, Darren. Thank you very much indeed. And that's it from the BBC News at 1. The news continues here on BBC One. As now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and the regions for the news where you are. Do have a very good afternoon.
The headlines in Reporting Scotland this Monday lunchtime. The First Minister says the economy here needs migration and criticises the Home Secretary's views on the matter. And the couple driven from their home after being wrongly targeted by so-called paedophile hunters. Hello, good afternoon. The First Minister says sections of the economy here need migration and has criticised the UK government for regarding immigration as a dirty word. His comments come as the Home Secretary is expected to make a speech saying that the UK government must reduce overall immigration numbers. Suella Braverman says there's no good reason the country cannot train its own lorry drivers and fruit pickers. Well, I'm joined from Westminster by our correspondent David Porter. And David, I suppose no surprise that these two disagree on this topic. David, thank you. A woman who was driven from her Dumbarton home after her partner was targeted by paedophile hunters is calling on social media companies to remove posts making unfounded accusations. Shona McLean said the incident in February had resulted from an allegation in a social media post. This lunchtime, Facebook has removed the post. Katrina Renton reports. Now, since its very first flight 90 years ago, Scotland's air ambulance has been providing life-saving care to people who live on our islands and remote communities. crews are now dealing with more incidents than ever before. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers joined a crew on shift. OK, Judith now has a weather forecast.
Good afternoon. Edinburgh Castle there dominating the blue skies earlier on today after last week when we were shrouded in har. But no har problems coming for the East Coast this week. That's your forecast.
That's all for now. Laura Goodwin is here at 6:30 tonight. But from all of us on Lunchtime Team, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.
I'm about to kiss a boy I've never met.
No chat, no messages, just a kiss.